I think what we're seeing right now, these interrelated crises of, systemic racism, systemic anti-Black racism, COVID-19, climate change, settler colonialism here and elsewhere. It really compels me, and I would hope it would compel mainstream organizations. Like when we see what is happening right now, again, in so-called Canada, when we see, the lack of accountability on part of colonial institutions, that we really need to meet the moment that we're in right now. And we're, in many cases, we're not. And we really need to, elevate and amplify the liberatory kind of practices that Black, Indigenous, POC folks in particular have been cultivating since time, right? That Audre Lorde quote, like that is something that has been around for a while. Like these are practices and knowledge bases that have been around for a while. And these practices, everything from, the transnational organizing and movement building, across, Palestinian, Indigenous, and Black solidarities, the mutual aid and collective care work that's happening, very locally. Like the world is like literally and figuratively like on fire right now. And there is still so much built-in resistance to meaningful transformative change. So some of the things that I've kind of observed around this, these like the systemic barriers that facilitate this, and quite frankly, manufacture the systemic oppression that we're seeking to solve. So one, we're like not reckoning with our true histories, like particularly within mainstream organizations, we're not recognizing the transgenerational reproduction of this oppression. In city building in particular, we see this in the policing and surveillance in space. We see this in housing and experiences of homelessness. We see this in the continued displacement of Black and Indigenous peoples from land, both in the Canadian context and again, globally. I would encourage people to learn the history of Hogan's Alley, to learn the history of Africville, all of which is happening on stolen land, right? In violation of treaties and our responsibility to treaties. And we know that Canada's been really effective in erasing colonialism and white supremacy from its national narrative, right? And so urban planning, a background that I have, has been a really effective tool in that. Building of cities was, building of cities was like a civilizing activity, and it was consistent with delegitimizing Indigenous ways of knowing, right? Cities were built to remove Indigenous peoples from land and legitimize settler claims to that land. Canada is a colonial project. Canada, in its early iterations, was very, very much part of perpetuating colonial violence on the African continent, both in the theft of human beings and aggressive resource extraction. And all of this work to create a machinery of wealth accumulation that continues to uphold and privilege white-led institutions over institutions led by Black, Indigenous, and racialized folks.